There are stories of humans who rose above fear and fate, but this is the story of the one who refused to stop even when the universe itself tried to end him. In the ages when the universe had almost forgotten the meaning of mercy, there lived a human whose footsteps seemed to strike against the very laws of nature, and in every place where his shadow fell, something unexplainable began to tremble, as if reality itself hesitated to stand in front of him. His name was whispered like a distant storm, a sound carried across battlefields and broken worlds, a sound that made even the oldest cosmic predators pause, because they knew that once he arrived, nothing remained the same. His story does not begin with triumph, but with silence, the kind of silence that forms in the heart after everything you love has been taken away. He had not chosen greatness, he had not chased glory, he had only chosen to continue moving forward. When every force told him to fall, he was the human who was impossible to stop. The first time the universe tested him was on the shattered plains of Varelis, a world where gravity rose and fell like breathing tides, crushing armies, then swallowing them into the dust. The air was thick like invisible stone, yet he walked across that cruel battlefield without bending his spine, without losing a single breath, his heartbeat sounding like a steady ancient drum. The enemy watched him moving through the shifting gravity fields, expecting him to collapse, expecting him to gasp and crumble, but he did not. Their weapons fired from every direction, streaks of blue fire cutting through the air, yet he kept walking as if the world around him had slowed, as if every obstacle had lost its strength before touching him. Some said he moved because he was fearless, but the truth was deeper. He moved because he had once felt fear so fiercely that there was nothing left in him that could be broken. He had already known the feeling of being powerless once, and he had sworn he would never feel it again. When the first blade of the invaders struck against his armor, the sound echoed across the plains like thunder, and he stood unmoving, unshaken, staring into the eyes of the creature before him, not with anger and not with hatred, but with a quiet resolve that shook the creature more than any roar could have. He fought not like a warrior born in legend, but like a man carrying the weight of memory. Every step forward was a refusal, every strike was a promise, every breath a reminder that he was still here, still alive, still moving. Soon tales spread across the outer systems that there was a human who could not be slowed, and for the first time in centuries humanity felt something bright stir inside them. It was hope, a quiet, fragile spark, but hope nonetheless. Yet the universe does not allow such beings to exist without challenge, and so came the dark fleets of Narration, vast swarms of metal and living shadows, their arrival turning the horizon into a wall of moving night. Whole civilizations had surrendered to them, but he did not. When he stepped into the battlefield of the Narration, a strange calm settled over him, as if the universe itself waited to see what he would do. The ground trembled beneath the weight of their monstrous war engines, but he walked forward, each footstep steady, like the ticking of a cosmic clock. Lasers streaked past him, explosions erupted around him, the very sky burned, yet he moved as though wrapped in a shield of determination, not physical, not visible, but carved deep in the soul. Many wondered how one human could stand against such impossible odds. But it was not strength that guided him, it was conviction, the pure, unshakable belief that giving up was a language he had never learned. There came a moment when the Narration unleashed their most devastating weapon, a beam capable of hollowing mountains and erasing cities in a single breath. It carved through the battlefield with blinding light, and everything it touched vanished. Everything except him. The light struck him, and the world trembled, but he did not fall, and when the light faded, he stood in the glowing crater, smoke rising around him like the breath of a dying star. Even the Narration hesitated for a heartbeat, unable to understand what they were seeing. He raised his arms slowly, not as a gesture of victory, but as a sign to himself, a reminder that he was still here, the impossible human, the unstoppable force of will. They attacked him again, wave after relentless wave, but stopping him was like trying to halt time itself. He pushed forward not because he believed he could win, but because he refused to surrender to the idea of defeat. Every world he stepped on found strength in his presence. Soldiers who had lost all courage felt their hearts Rise people who had given up found a reason to stand again. Some called him a symbol, others called him a miracle, but he never accepted any of those names. He knew he was simply a human doing what humans have always done, surviving, enduring, refusing to kneel. On the final day of Narration, the sky above the last human stronghold broke apart under a storm of enemy fire. But he stood at the front lines, staring into that endless storm with the same unwavering calm he had carried since the beginning. When the ground shook and the sky roared, he stepped forward once more, and the entire army behind him followed, not because they believed they would win, but because they believed in him, the human who walked through fire, through darkness, through despair without stopping. The battle that followed became legend, not because of victory, but because of the way he moved through it. Every blast of fire parted around him, every explosion thundered, yet could not break his stride. Every enemy that faced him felt something ancient and terrifying, the raw, unstoppable spirit of humanity. And in the heart of that final clash, as the universe seemed to collapse into chaos, he let out a breath, not a roar, not a cry, just a breath. And with that breath, everything changed. The soldiers behind him felt courage rise. Like a second heartbeat, the enemies felt their will crack like thin glass. They say he reached the core of the Narration flagship alone, that he walked its burning corridors with ashes swirling around him like black snow, that he faced their commander in silence, and ended the war not with rage, but with quiet, unstoppable certainty. When it was over, when the fires dimmed, when the darkness lifted, and the universe took its first peaceful breath in centuries, he stood at the edge of the battlefield looking at the horizon, bruised and scarred, but unbroken, and at that moment, even the stars seemed to bow their light. He was the human who refused to stop, the human who kept moving when the universe demanded he fall, the human who taught countless worlds what resilience truly meant. And those centuries may pass and names may be forgotten, his story will travel with every wandering traveler, carried through every distant colony, whispered across every quiet night, because somewhere out there across the endless dark, someone will always remember the truth that as long as humans exist, as long as hearts beat and dreams rise, there will always be another who refuses to stop. And yet his journey did not end with victory, because the universe has a way of testing those who stand too firmly, those who dare to keep walking when creation itself wants them to kneel. After the fall of Narration, he wandered through the silent remains of forgotten star systems, each world carrying the scars of the battles that had raged for centuries. He walked through valleys filled with the bones of ancient machines. He crossed deserts where even the wind refused to blow, as if the sand still remembered the weight of all that had been lost. People expected him to rest, to finally allow himself a moment of peace, but his heart knew that evil does not vanish, it only sleeps, and he had no intention of letting it rise again. For many, he became a myth, a rumor, spoken around firelight on drifting colonies, but for a few who truly knew, they understood that he was searching for the one thing that had shaped him long ago, the one wound that never healed. A long time before the wars, before the battles, before the stories, he had lived on a quiet moon far from the restless hunger of the galaxies, and there he had lost everything to an enemy. No human had ever seen an enemy that vanished into the dark. Before humanity even realized what had happened, they called them the silent choir, beings of pure resonance, beings who attacked not with weapons, but with vibrations that shattered emotions and memories, leaving behind living beings who could not remember their own names. He had survived that night, not because he was strong, but because he was too young to understand fear, and in that innocence, he witnessed the moment his world fell apart, and that memory stayed, burning in him like a star that refused to die. Now, after all these years, after all these battles, he had found a trace of them, the faint echo of a frequency so ancient and so strange that only someone who had once touched it could recognize it. So he followed it across the void, leaving behind the praise, the celebrations, the medals, and the songs, because none of them mattered to him. He was not searching for glory, he was searching for closure and for truth. His journey took him to the nebular divide, a region so unstable that even the bravest pilots avoided it. The clouds of swirling cosmic dust pulsed with currents strong enough to tear ships apart. But he entered the storm without hesitation, his ship shaking his path, lit only by flickers of dying starlight. Inside that endless storm, he faced illusions not created by enemies, but formed from his own memories. He saw the shadows of people he had once loved reaching out to him, begging him to stop, to rest, to let go. But he moved forward the same way he always had, with a heart scarred but unbroken. Then the storm parted, and he saw it, a colossal structure hanging in the void like a cathedral built from frozen light, and living shadow, the home of the silent choir, a place that seemed to hum with the sorrow of thousands of lost worlds. When he stepped inside the structure, the air vibrated softly like distant whispers, and the walls shifted with every heartbeat. As if alive, as if listening, he walked through long corridors where time felt wrong, where moments stretched and folded like dreams, the air filled with echoes of voices that did not belong to the living. At the heart of the structure, he found them, the beings who had once destroyed his world. They did not have faces, they did not have forms, merely shifting waves of resonance, shaped like silhouettes, made of music and shadow. They spoke without sound, their voices entering through the soul rather than the ears. And in that moment, he felt everything they felt: their pain, their purpose, their endless wandering across the universe, seeking answers to questions they themselves could not remember. They had not destroyed worlds out of hatred. They had done it out of confusion, driven by the noise and chaos of the universe, seeking silence, seeking stillness, blind to the destruction they left behind. For the first time in his life, he felt no anger toward those who had taken everything from him. He felt only understanding and a sorrow as deep as the void itself. But he also knew that understanding did not erase what had been done, and so he stood before them and let his resolve speak louder than any weapon could. He told them without words that humanity would not be silenced, that life would not fade quietly into the darkness. He showed them, through the force of his spirit, that existence was meant to rise and resist and fight and heal. The silent choir trembled at the strength of what they felt within him, and the chamber filled with a low, aching vibration, until at last the beings began to retreat, their forms dissolving like mist carried by invisible wind, leaving behind a stillness that felt strangely peaceful. He had not defeated them, he had reached them, and in doing so he changed the fate of countless future worlds. When he walked out of the structure, it began to crumble, silently releasing centuries of imprisoned echoes into the universe. The storm around him softened, and for the first time in ages the divide lay still like a sleeping giant. As he stepped back onto open space and looked at the stars shining like distant promises, he realized something profound. He had spent his entire life moving forward, not because he wanted revenge, not because he wanted victory, but because he carried the unspoken truth that someone had to stand, someone had to walk, someone had to keep going so others could rest. He understood now that being unstoppable did not mean being unbreakable. It meant choosing to rise each time the universe tried to crush him, choosing to walk when the path was nothing but fire, choosing to remain human even when all hope burned away. And so he continued his journey across the stars, not as a warrior, not as a legend, but as a reminder that somewhere within every human heart lies a quiet, unstoppable force waiting to wake, waiting to rise, waiting to become the story the universe cannot silence. And as long as he walked, worlds would follow his footsteps, and as long as he breathed, hope would never run out, and as long as he lived, he would remain what he had always been, the human who was impossible to stop.